Welcome to Bear Balance. I'm Jeff Berckes. Other side of the screen, Leter A, Wiltfong Jr. Leter, we got through February. We're into March. March is a good month. It is a month of hope. It is a month of renewal. It is a month where the new league year starts. Yeah. How are you doing?
Good, man. We're exactly 1 week from the early negotiation period of free agency. So it's this week should be fun and busy for the NFL.
I like to call it the legal tampering period just because our friend Ken Mitchell really gets irritated by it, and I love to poke the bear every once in a while. But we've got a special guest. We don't do a ton of guests, but in the off season, we like to bring on some guys if we can. And we've got our guy Khari Thompson on, who's fresh from Indianapolis. You can see the cocktail sauce still in his beard from the shrimp cocktails. Khari, my man, what do you got drinking tonight?
Got myself a Bacardi and Coke. That is my favorite. That is my drink of choice. Anybody that hangs out with me down at the Combine, Brad Spielberger being one of them. He wasn't here this year, but I've seen him a bunch of times. Shout out, Brad. Knows that this is my drink of choice. Being half Puerto Rican, I grew up with Bacardi and Cokes. And listen, when I need to take the edge off, or I need a little hair of the dog, which is actually more of what I need right now, because Lord, I stayed out too much at the Combine this year. This is what I turn to.
Little Cuba Libre. So, Khari, let me start here. Every time I hear anybody going to Indianapolis, they talk about the shrimp cocktails, and they talk about the late nights where they're talking to and fraternizing with other writers, with other content creators, with people that work for organizations. And so I got to start off asking you about the rumor mill. What did you hear? Ben Johnson stuff, Caleb Williams stuff, any sort of trade talk, any league dirt gossip, whatever you want to share with us. We'd love to hear some goss.
So I would say this year, unlike other years, I kind of branched out a little bit and I was hanging with a little bit of a different crowd, not as many beat writers this time. However, the person I got asked about the most when it came to the Chicago Bears was not Caleb Williams. It was actually DJ Moore, because I think a lot of people around the league are like, hey, is your boy available? And I've heard from a couple of different people that they think that DJ Moore is all but gone. They do not expect him to be playing with the Chicago Bears in 2026. Now, obviously, listen, I think a lot of that can sometimes be, people have been reading the headlines, right? Bears fans aren't happy with DJ Moore after what happened on that last play. I heard a couple of people bring that up when they were talking about Caleb Williams and talking about the season he had and being like, well, if it wasn't for that, that last play, people would be thinking about him differently. And then immediately being like, it's because the receiver didn't give any effort. So there are a lot of people that are kind of looking at DJ Moore and being like, that's a trade chip that I think people ought to be using. Also, I think that it's interesting that this came out today that, hey, a bunch of people might be interested in Tremaine Edmonds and trading for him, because what I heard around town was people were kind of almost laughing at the idea that someone would actually want to trade for Tremaine Edmonds. I think most of them think that he's going to hit the open market. Obviously had himself a good year when he was healthy, but I think there are a lot of people who aren't as bullish on the Tremaine Edmonds market. You wonder if some of that is like, oh yeah, people are really interested in Tremaine Edmonds. Might be, a certain team trying to gas it up. You know what I mean? So I heard a little bit of that. I even heard a little bit of stadium talk, and I can't remember who exactly said it, but it was somebody that I follow and trust. I remember in the moment being like, really, man? Saying like, oh yeah, the Bears are going to Hammond. It's over. They're going to Indiana. And I'm like, hold up. I think that might be conjecture, because to me, and listen, I'm a resident of I'm a native of Northwest Indiana.
Yeah.
Right now I'm in Boston. I'm a native of Northwest Indiana, which honestly I forgot, because I feel like I'm in Indiana so rarely now.
It's so forgettable
that people know where Hobart, Indiana is. When you're in Indianapolis, they're like, oh yeah, I know where that is. Out here in Boston, they're like, what is that? What's that by? And I'm just like, That's by Chicago. Oh, so you're from Chicago? Like, not really, but I did go to school there, so I claim it. But yeah, like people, around there are thinking like, yo, I think the Bears might actually be doing this Indiana thing. And I keep trying to be like, they want to be in Chicago. I'm pretty sure, or rather they want to be in Arlington Heights. So we'll see how that goes. But those are some of the things that I heard around town. In particular, I think the DJ Moore thing is very interesting when you look at the movement that's starting to happen around the league. I was in the interview room when the T'Vondre Sweat news, when T'Vondre Sweat got traded from the Titans to the Jets. I was there as that started circulating. People were like, oh, first domino falls, kind of like that. And then obviously Titus Howard gets traded from the Texans to the Browns today. So I think people are starting to look around like, yeah, I think some trades are gonna be going down here soon as that legal tampering period begins. And in particular, he's not a Bear, but the one guy I think that everybody expects to switch teams is Max Crosby. I'm just saying.
Could happen. Personally, Khari, my philosophy about saying that you're from Chicago, it's the further away you are from Chicago, the less likely people understand the Midwest.
Exactly.
So me, as an Iowan, I would never say to any other American that I'm from Chicago. But when I was in New Zealand, when I was in Kenya in my life, and people say, where are you from? The U.S., what part? I go, near Chicago, because at least I'm like kind of near the map in that way, right? So out in Boston, yeah, I'm you can say you're from near Chicago because that's about as close as they can understand it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, that's a nice thing about being in Boston is that like people know what Boston is, right? Sure. Like you don't have to say I'm by New York when you say you're from Boston, but it's like, if you're just in the middle of nowhere like Indiana, everybody's just like, what is that?
The region. Just say the region. Yeah.
Well, see, and that's interesting because some people actually do, like far and wide, do know what the region is.
Yeah. It's one of those crazy things where if you're from Chicago, you don't want to hear someone claiming Chicago. It's like, they take pride in that city. So it's okay to pull it off when you're in New Zealand, but don't try and pull that stuff off, somewhere in the States, because people.
I never say I'm from Chicago. I say near,
around Chicago.
Yeah. See, I'm actually like, I grew up 35 minutes outside of Chicago. Spent a lot of time driving to and from. I had family up there, and then obviously, like I went to University of Chicago. I was gonna say go Maroons, except that most people don't know that they even have athletics there.
They haven't had football in a very long time, but they used to, and they have a.
It used to be really good, and they actually have a football team now. It's Division III, so it used to be Division I. They used to be a powerhouse.
Be the Big Ten,
and then they decided they wanted to be straight nerds, which I respect. I'm a nerd, obviously. That's why I went there. But my brother went there, and he actually played for the football team. So he was an interior offensive lineman, kind of swing offensive lineman. Got some run at like right guard and stuff like that. So yeah, can confirm. I went to the games. There is a football team.
There wasn't when I was going to college. You're a little younger than me, because I remember going on a visit and they did not have a football team. So interesting that you mentioned DJ. I think, we've talked about on this show quite a bit, and, Lester, I think as we ended the season, thought, I think he's going to come back, and I think he's gone. So I think there's still, some disagreement, on where a lot of Bears fans sit on that. I think that Bears brass would prefer it if the narrative was it's just a really competitive room and we need to rejigger the roster, and not get into maybe why the Bears might not want DJ Moore on the squad. But I think we've really come down to, like, it's a really good football player, and it just may not be the right fit for what Ben Johnson's offense needs in terms of that constant and total focus that's required every player on the field, because sometimes I think he might just lose that focus. So interesting that his name was brought up more than anything. But let's move on to this draft. So obviously the combine kind of kicks off in a lot of ways the robust discussions about a lot of these prospects. And one of the things that I like to try to understand about every draft, which then immediately gets forgotten right after the draft, and everybody just talks about it like every draft is the exact same always, right? But you and I know, and Lester, we all know that sometimes the 25th pick in the draft is guaranteed to get you like a really good, solid player that can come in and, contribute right away. And sometimes it's like, well, it's a little bit of a more shallow draft, right? Like a 4th round pick in one draft may be much more likely to contribute early than a 4th round pick in a different draft, right? So the shape of a draft can be very different in terms of number of blue chip prospects, the number of good contributing prospects and number of projects that you might have, right? So as you see this class as of right now, how would you describe the shape of the 2026 NFL draft?
I would say this class is light on true blue chip prospects, and the ones that there are not playing at premium positions. I would not claim to know what Francisco Mendoza is going to be. He's going to be the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah.
I would not claim to know what he's going to do at the next level. I think that, a lot of people are trying to put his career arc in the same breadth as like Joe Burrow, a guy who transferred to a school, though Burrow had more than 1 year at LSU, that he transfers to a school and magically like blows up and wins a national championship and becomes number 1 overall pick. And then, so on and so forth. I don't view Mendoza on that level of player. And I'll have other notes on that. I got a guy I want to bring on to talk about that. I'm sure I'm going to allude to some of the things that I heard from him as an evaluator in terms of, his draft evaluations. In particular, like Joe Burrow, I think he was a unique case because a lot of people were talking about him as, is he a one-hit wonder? And I remember watching him play and being like, I don't know. I think this guy's pretty good. And he's turned out to be pretty good at the NFL level. So I don't know that I see Mendoza on that same level. However, the guys that you do see, so Sonny Styles goes out and has an absolute mutant combine. Like he's basically like Calvin Johnson if you made him a linebacker, which is hilarious to think about. And then he might be the quote unquote worst player of the 3 Ohio State guys that are going to go top 10, right? Arvell Reese and Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Love, to me, they're the best 2 players in this draft. Neither one of them plays safety and one of them plays running back. So that's how I think a lot of this draft is going to shape up. I mean, the off-ball linebackers that we saw at the combine, they absolutely annihilated their workouts. I mean, you're watching these guys, you're like, no way, man. Like, I can't even remember what they ran as an average. And some people point out, right, the averages of the 40 times are dropping because the slow people aren't running. They're running at their pro days, which is true. But I mean, again, just like the dudes that are out here running, like, people being like, Jacob Martinez got to run a good time. And he runs a 4.5. And you're like, buddy, like he's out here dipping. And so, again, the linebackers and safeties were the best 2 position groups that I saw out there. And they're not premium positions. The running backs, I thought overall had a pretty good day. I've seen a bunch of people being like, not a good running back class. They sure tested well. I'm going to say that. They were out there doing their thing. So I feel like this is not a great year to need the premium positions because I don't feel great about many of the quarterbacks, if any of them. I don't feel great about a lot of the edge guys. I mean, Arvell Reese, he's explosive. He's a good athlete. I don't know if he's actually an edge in the NFL. Ruben Bain comes in and has ridiculously short arms. Is he going to be good at the next level? He sure dominated in college. I'll tell you that. Like he's a good player, but is he going to be a dominant outside, pass rusher? I don't know. I don't know about that in the NFL. And then people talk about defensive tackles, which is becoming more of, an important position. I got to be honest, man. I'm not feeling this tackle class. I'm really not. Aside from the guys that are going to be at the very top, like I have a mock draft that I'm working on right now for PFF. And listen, you got to take PFF mock drafts with a grain of salt, because they're not going to catch up to where guys are actually going to go until we get about to the draft. But I'm like, dog, if Peter Woods from Clemson actually fell to number 25, I'll sprint the card up for that one. Cool. But I don't think that's going to happen. And if it doesn't, I gotta be straight with you. Any mock draft that puts Caden McDonald in at number 25, I'm going to be looking at him sideways from here on after what I saw. I'm just saying.
That's the main pick. I mean, if you look at a lot of the mocks, most of those mocks lately, like the last few weeks, this is all pre-combine, right? Most of those mocks pre-combine, it's all Caden McDonald, Ohio State, number 25.
That is firmly a second round grade for me. I'm not touching that one in the first round based off of what I've seen. And listen, here's the thing. We gotta keep in mind, because I've watched, some of Caden McDonald's tape.
He's more nose tackle, right?
Yeah, he said it in interviews. He said, I'm a nose. I mean, he didn't say it exactly like that, but he's like, listen, if a team wants a nose, like, I'm your guy. That's not to say that he wouldn't play a one technique, or he would play. All of these guys would play wherever you ask them to play. But I'm watching him move around, and again, this is big 300 plus pound guys out here they got him doing backpedaling and side to side and whatnot. They're not going to do that. But it's just an interesting, drill, an interesting situation to put these guys in. Caden McDonald, he can't move.
To be fair, Khari, you mentioned the guy that was testing really well, and you said he was dipping. And this large gentleman is also dipping, but in a very different way. He's dipping on the snack table, with chips and dip, right? Like that's this kind of dip. And that's more of what Lester and I, are able to really relate to.
His dip is, you line up in front of the center every single play, and you run straight into that dude. And that's your job. Which, again, I think it's important to note the Chicago Bears do need guys who can do that. They do need guys who can just take up space, or one gapping, or whatever it is. They need guys who can stop the run. They really do. I'm just thinking to myself, am I taking a one-dimensional nose tackle at number 25? And having mentioned the fact that the linebackers and safeties were the best position groups that I saw, would you not rather just take the better player in those positions? But before we get there, see, we got the tab there.
Let me set you up here. So
we got some stuff we got to do.
You're bleeding us into this. So let's talk about what the Bears need.
Big
right?
market
So
teams.
The shape of the draft, I think, does fit a little bit with what the Bears need here. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of work to be done in terms of maybe some trades off the roster, maybe some trades onto the roster, and then certainly looking at the free agent pool, that first and second wave before we get to the draft. So a lot of the needs are going to be addressed through those things before you get to the draft. That's what every GM is helping for, is like, I can go into the season with this roster that I have, and then we're going to add to that with our draft picks and hope that we can add some competition and hopefully get a couple starters. But as you see the roster and heading into this free agency period leading up to the draft, what do you see are the biggest needs for the Bears right now?
Well, the biggest needs are, listen, all that being said, what I just said, the biggest needs are unquestionably on the defensive front. They just are. Right. I mean, they didn't get any. They were among the 3 or 4 worst run defenses in the league last year, and one of the 2 worst pass rushing teams in the league. So listen, we got to be straight up about it. The defensive front, whether you're talking about tackle or edge, those are the most glaring needs that you have to address. The question is, how do you address them maximally? Right. And maybe that is a couple of good players. Maybe it's one great / elite player. And then, for example, I've used the New England Patriots as an example quite a lot. What they ended up doing was they signed Milton Williams, who is an absolute destroyer. They got him off the Philadelphia Eagles in free agency. They signed him to a $100 million contract. When he's in the game, he's destroying everything, right? You can't run on the Patriots, and he's also influencing. He's pushing the pocket, right? He's a guy who does it all. And then aside from that, you have Christian Barmore, who is a really good player when healthy, that you have under contract. And then you got Harold Landry, on like a cheaper deal because he's dealt with some injury issues, and Clavon Chasen. So it's like your edges weren't that amazing, but they ate off of all the pressure that the interior guys were causing. And so I feel like the Bears, in a way, have a little bit of that structure already in place, where you've got Gervon Dexter, and you also have Montez Sweat. So let's be real. You got a couple of guys on one side that can do some things. And then it's kind of the other side you got to worry about, who's playing opposite them. So that's where the idea of, if I got an edge who can do both, right? If I were able to swing that trade for Max Crosby, or I was able to sign Trey Hendrickson, or even Jalen Phillips, I feel like if you were going to go for a slightly maybe cheaper option, if you wanted to go with Jalen Phillips, and then you were able to fill in the other defensive tackle position with, maybe a cheap veteran, or, maybe a, day 2, day 3 pick, right? Because that's one thing that I heard from a lot of guys, is that this might not be a great tackle for elite talent at the defensive tackle spot. And it's not great for 3 techs. You got a lot of 1 techs in this draft, but you have a lot of 1 techniques who are all right. And so there's that idea of, maybe I could get me a guy on day 2 that can slot right in the way Dexter did and make an impact for you, plus a veteran signing, because you're going to have that. So clearly it's up front on defense. I also think, because I had a couple different discussions about this, you also have needs pretty badly at left tackle, because I don't care what nobody says. I had a fan come up to me in a bar, actually, and a Bears fan, and was talking about what are the Bears going to do in the draft. And be like, we don't need a left tackle. We got like Theo Benedette. And I'm like, listen, you can't be in one breath. You can't be like, oh, Caleb Williams is the truth, and like he's the best thing that's ever happened to the Bears, and then in the same breath be like, we're going to trust his protection to Theo Benedette. I'm not with that. So you got to find some way to get at least average tackle play at left tackle, whether that's a rookie, whether it's a cheap veteran, I don't know. But you got to find some way to get competent tackle play over there. Doesn't have to be great, but it does need to be decent. Then you've got linebacker issues, real bad, because right now, what linebackers are you counting on? Tremaine Edmonds is going to be gone. He's either going to get traded or he's going to get cut. Then you got TJ Edwards, who's hurt, and you don't know what he's going to be like. You have Noah Sewell, who's going to be coming off a torn Achilles. I don't even know he's going to play next year at all. And you might be able to bring back DeMarco Jackson. Maybe he's a free agent, but do you want to be starting DeMarco Jackson? So you've got issues there. You have no safeties under contract either. So really, the only position that you feel moderately good about on this roster is corner. And even that has questions, because you got one really good corner when he's healthy, and then whatever's going on over there, Nishan Wright's probably not going to be here. Someone's going to pay him, and you probably shouldn't be the team to do it because you don't got the money for that. And then Tyreek Stevenson, which you could rock with that, but it's pretty inconsistent. And then Kyler Gordon, again, really good when he's healthy, not healthy enough. So you could make an argument for any one of these positions on defense. You need somebody. So that's why I'm kind of the opinion that best player available really works for the Chicago Bears in the draft. And that's without knowing what they do in free agency. And also, real quick, one last one before I go. I'm assuming they're going to cut DeAndre Swift, so you might need a running back too.
That would surprise me. I think Swift may be pretty good there just because, look, it's $7-ish million. They're going to save there. I think if they come down to the cap, that's something they're going to look at for sure. But I don't think they're going to try and create a holder unless they have to. But yeah, I think to your point that the needs of the Bears line up good with the draft. Like you said, safety's really deep, linebackers pretty deep. You mentioned Rodriguez ran that ridiculous speed, and his film looks pretty good. I watched a little bit of him over the weekend. Then he's a later day 3 game, maybe 3rd round. Is what I'm kind of hearing on him. Yeah, so the Bears
he's probably a day 2. I don't think he'll go day 1 because there are just enough good players. But he's probably a 2nd round guy now.
It's like a shift though in like the NFL now. Like now we're starting to see some safeties and linebackers kind of get pushed up the board, and we're kind of seeing teams kind of want to have that happen. Even with running backs, we saw David Montgomery get traded today for a ridiculous round pick, but the teams want running backs. It's like an old school throwback. A lot of defenses playing too high. So let's pound the rock, right? So I think we're kind of starting to see a shift here, and the way the Bears need you lined up, I think it lines up well with this draft.
I agree, because no matter which direction you go, if you go defense at all with number 25, you're hitting a position that you need to hit. Yeah. And I know that there are a lot of people who's like, we have to go defensive tackle, or we have to go edge. I'm like, no, you don't. First of all, we don't know what free agency looks like yet. We don't know what trades there might be pulled off. But even if that were the case, you could literally throw a dart at the board on defense, and you're picking somebody that you need. Yeah. And to that point, another thing that I heard from a couple people who were kind of scouting things out in terms of the overall trends, it's both the too high safety thing, but it's also the fact that for a while here, what did you see? You saw offenses spreading things out with lots of fast receivers, lots of speed, right? And then defenses match that by going with every personnel group. You're basically, your main personnel group is nickel or dime, because you're like, these teams want to throw on us, and they want to push it downfield, and want to do all that. And so now offenses are saying, oh, you want to go light? We're going to go heavy again. And I mean, I referenced this in an article that I wrote recently for Windy City Gridiron, but teams are running the ball at a rate that we haven't seen since like the mid 2000s and 1990s. Teams are picking up on and passing yards are down, because you're realizing, oh, well, you got to check the ball down more. You can't be throwing the ball down the field, because teams are waiting for that. And so what are you seeing now? Teams are running the ball more often. The yards per carry are about the same, but overall, it's looking more efficient because of the light boxes the teams are running into. So now you're seeing these linebackers start to become more important. You're starting to see these box safeties become more important. Whereas before they'd be like, we want the rangy guy, the guy who's going to stop the pass. Now you want the guy who's going to stop the run, because for the last probably 4 to 5 years, teams have been starting to maybe not move away from the pass, but the pass hasn't been what it used to be. Passing yards have been increasingly for the last 4 years.
And our guy Ben Johnson at the forefront of that with his balanced attack and with his offensive approach, which really marries the run and the pass with the play action game really well. So let's move on to the combine specifically. A couple of names. Make sure you give the position, because I don't know all of the guys you're talking about. So I know all of our listeners don't know all the names that you're talking about. But who are a couple of the guys that really shot up the board for you when you were there? Just you personally, or whoever you were hearing from the cohort that you were sitting with?
Well, I would say that again, Jacob Rodriguez was probably number one, because in terms of combine winners, because I think here was a guy, like I heard it from a number of different people, like, oh, he really needs to run a good time, because I don't know what he's going to end up doing if he doesn't, that he's going to be like a, late day 3 or a 4th round pick or something like that. And he goes and runs like, I don't know, like a 4.58 or something like that. And it really just kind of changed the trajectory, because then he gets on the field and you're like, this right here, this is what a linebacker looks like. Just everything. Because again, like Lester, you talked about watching this film. It's like, so much of what he does just looks like what a linebacker is supposed to do on tape. And then it's just a matter of athletically, where do you see him at? And so I think he helped himself the most. I'll also say that if you want to get into, the Sonny Styles of it all, Styles was a guy that I think everybody was like, look, on film, you're looking at him, Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs, and they all just look like they're playing at a sped up pace from what everybody else is doing, right? I remember watching some of these and I'm like, they look like somebody, you know, put on like Tecmo Bowl, but they put Bo Jackson at linebacker. And but it's three of them, and they're all just like flowing and blowing things up, and it's crazy. But then Sonny Styles goes out there and tests like the human equivalent of a Utah Raptor, and just absolutely destroys everything. And now you got people over here talking about he should be the number 2 overall pick off of potential alone. That's wild.
Khari had to get that dinosaur reference in there.
What the hell is a Utah Raptor?
Listen, I'll put it this way. Utah Raptor is what Velociraptor wants to be when it grows up. And so for those of y'all watching this who don't know me, I used to study paleontology. So I used to actually like work in a dinosaur lab and everything. So Velociraptor, like the Jurassic Park Velociraptor, is basically like the like little brother or like little cousin of Utah Raptor. That brother was out here like, you know, 20 feet long, jumping out the gym faster than everybody. And it's just kind of like, yo. So anyway, that's my guy.
That's Sonny Styles.
That's Sonny Styles. Mike Washington from Arkansas, he busts out a fourth
what position?
In the 40 as a running back.
Okay.
So he runs 4.33 at a running back. I ain't even heard of this dude. So it was great actually to go back and be like, okay, hold on, I got to dig into this guy.
Oh, is that the real big dude? That's the
yeah, he's a big guy too.
Yeah. Okay,
that's the fun part, right? Yeah. He's like a 6 foot plus running back out there doing that. I can't say Jeremiah Love because everybody knew Jeremiah Love was going to go top 10, but then of course he runs a 4.36. And just like looks like a complete alien compared to the rest of the running backs on the on-field drills. But you already knew he was good. Kenyon Sadiq, listen, okay, I actually was watching his 40, watching his workout alongside, you know, a guy who walked on in college, and he ran like a 4.47 when he was in college, and he's watching Kenyon Sadiq run the 40. He runs a 4.4 flat, and he's like, I hate that guy. Like, why you got to be 6'4", 6'5", you know, tight end who runs a 4.4? Come on. Because I think there were a bunch of people out here that were like, nah, Kenyon Sadiq, he's going to measure too small. You know, I'm not really feeling him. I don't know what he's going to do in the NFL is kind of like almost like a straight up pure move tight end. And then he goes and runs a 4.4 flat. So that was one. I think that if you want to talk about a defensive tackle that I think really made a name for himself, it was probably Caleb Banks, which doesn't necessarily surprise anyone because he came into this, you knew he was huge, and you knew from the Senior Bowl he could move. But then I think that the gap between the combine that he put up and just about any other dude, his explosiveness was like he did like a 9.6 broad jump at a 32-inch vertical at 6'6", like 320 pounds or something crazy like that, 327 pounds. This brother's unreal. So I think that's what I would look at in terms of the biggest kind of, okay, those are first rounders, you know, except for Mike Washington, he'll go later. But those other guys I mentioned, they're first rounders. And if they were already first rounders, that means they're going to go like as high as like top 5. I think just generally though, if we want to talk about position groups, again, I'm going to mention the linebackers. They were incredible all the way around, which tells me, again, even if you don't take one in the first round, you're going to feel real good if you take one on day 2 or early. I mean, even if you want to take one on day 3, you're probably going to find a guy that could start for you off rip. I also think an underrated one, while we're talking about running backs, I think Jadarian Price from Notre Dame has kind of been this name that's been talked about on the fringes of this whole thing, where he's obviously Jeremiah Love is something else, but Jadarian Price is your RB2. And I felt like he ran a 4.49, but he looked easy. Honestly, it looked really easy doing it, which tells me, again, I'm somebody who likes to study how people run. He has always been a guy who's like, okay, yeah, he's got a little twitch when you first get to him, but it's the long speed where he runs away from people at the end, right? You let him build it up and he'll take it. And he caught the ball really well. I feel like that was one thing that I liked, was that him and Jeremiah Love both did receiver drills after the main workout ended. I think Jadarian Price is going to be a first-round pick. I don't know who to. I'm just saying I got a little conspiracy idea when it comes to the Bears. I've written about a little bit. I'm not going to try and piss everybody off by dropping it on here, but I'm just saying I think Jadarian Price is going to be a first-round pick based off of what he did.
Knowing this fan base, I don't think you're going to upset people by saying that the Bears would take a Notre Dame player, like that they generally align pretty well.
But do you want to take a running back in the first round? I'm just saying.
Me personally, I love running backs. Like I'm whatever, man. Like to me, this feels like a spine of the defense draft. But yeah, like, it's Ben, man. If Ben thinks he needs an all-star back and he sees a vision, I'm not gonna be mad.
Yeah, I think that in that regard, and again, because I have my thoughts on DeAndre Swift, what it would save you to, whether you cut him or what have you. Obviously, I too, Lester, I think, DeAndre Swift had himself a real good year last year. I was not a fan of him in 2024, and I was not a fan in the first few weeks of 2025, but clearly he came on and I think really was an asset to this team. Absolutely. No questions about that. And I think there's also something to be said for the fact that even if the Bears wanted to upgrade at running back, who are your upgrades going to be? You know what I mean? Now I think I can't get this image out of my head of Kyle Monangai being your Knuckles. Who's your Sonic? You know what I mean? I have this feeling like Ben Johnson wants his Sonic. And I've heard little things about pursuit of Breece Hall, which doesn't look like that's going to do anything, because it sounds like whether they get Breece Hall signed to an extension or whether they franchise tag him, it doesn't look like he's leaving New York. And I wouldn't try to, do the tag and trade situation if I'm the Bears. I wouldn't do that. But if there's a Sonic in this draft, I mean, there are a couple of fast guys, but if you want the fast guy who also has, upside as a pass catcher, I'm just saying, like, there might be something to say there. That said, I think if you were to ask me, if it were my draft pick, what would I do if it were, number 25, all things kind of being as they are right now? I'm looking at one of these safeties, bro.
Yeah. Got a follow-up, Lester?
No, I mean, yeah, but like you said, the safeties are right there. I mean, the Bears have none under contract. Kevin Byard is the guy they've talked about bringing back, but he has a market now, right? I don't think the Bears thought he'd have much of a market, but we've heard some stuff about some other contenders possibly interested in him. And look, he's a family guy first. He's talked about it. He'll do what's best for his family. Mm-hmm. So if all things equal, yeah, I think he comes back to the Bears. But I think if another team, maybe the Patriots, another contending team that's really good, offer him a little more money, I think he's going to take the money and still have a chance to win with another team.
It's so interesting because I feel like, and again, I'm out here in Boston, and I feel like there are so many parallels between the Bears and Patriots over the last couple of years, like literally since they drafted Caleb Williams and Drake May. And a lot of the things that they want are like kind of directly competing. So that we saw it in the report by Bert Greer from Sports Illustrated that the Patriots and Bears are among the couple of teams that are checking in on Max Crosby, right? The Bears aren't necessarily going to be in a market for like an AJ Brown, whereas the Patriots are. But the Patriots might lose Jalen Hawkins to free agency, and then they might need a safety. So then you've got some, some overlap there with a bunch of these different things. I think, the Kevin Byard won't necessarily cost an extreme amount of money, but he's going to cost something because he might be 32, but he never leaves the field. He stays durable. And then, eventually, right, that might catch up to you because some of that is luck based. But listen, he's been on the field. You have no reason to think he's not going to be on the field, given the way that he's been durable. And he continues to be an asset to your defense and take the ball away. So if you want to keep him, you've got to pay for him. But then you're looking at that and saying, well, if that's going to be the case, I think Kevin Byard more often than not, he's more of your more true free at this point in his career, where you want him kind of managing the back end of things, who's going to go up there and do the dirty work. Obviously you want your safeties to be interchangeable, right, and be able to do whatever. But, if I want to talk about a guy who's going to come up and smack you in the mouth, there are a couple guys that could do that in this draft.
Yeah, we like that. Couple notes. One, I don't know what you could do better for your family than keep them in Chicago. So, there is that. And then I'm looking up this.
Tell my wife that.
I'm not getting in the middle of that.
No.
Now I'm looking up quickly the Utah Raptor, and listen, I feel like the people of Jurassic Park really made a mistake by not just leaning full into the Utah Raptor, because the front arms are like wings. They're feathered. And the whole Jurassic Park thing was like dinosaurs turn into birds, like that whole theory, the Sam Neill character's theory. And you would have had that with the Utah Raptor right there. This is a critical mistake in a classic movie.
So here's what I'm going to say in defense of the people who created Jurassic Park. Utah Raptor was only newly discovered. As a matter of fact, I think Utah Raptor was discovered the year Jurassic Park came out.
Whew.
So for those people who kind of don't know how it works, it takes a long time before you could really piece together the shape of what a dinosaur is. So they might have found that and not even find those bones and not even know what that was until they started finding more and really piecing it together. Paleontology in dinosaur like fossils can take a really long time. So in fairness to them, they probably didn't know. Now they based it on the design of another bigger raptor called Deinonychus. But if they had known about Utah Raptor back then, they would have been like, no, we got to have a Utah Raptor, bro.
It would have linked up. It would have been perfect.
It would have been absolutely
perfect, man. I've watched that movie so many times.
The idea of dinosaurs being like birds was more of a theory than anything. Like they had guys who kind of saw it and be like, no, I think this is more bird-like. But you still have people kind of being like, what do you mean? Like dinosaur and birds? And now we just kind of generally accept it because dinosaurs, like birds literally came from raptor dinosaurs. Like quite literally.
I'm telling you, I'm looking at this and like my mind's blown for this poor movie. That's been the seminal piece of.
But hey, listen, that's how science is. You move it forward,
absolutely.
Right? You learn, you gather new data with time, which is exactly why you gather new data with time and you evolve, which is why a lot of the this year's class and the way that the NFL is moving is a little different than it was back then. You're not out here throwing for 240 passing yards a game. This year, like that actually bugged me out when I was doing research that like the average passing yards per game for a team was literally like 209 yards. That's crazy. That's nuts. You call this a passing league and you could barely throw for Justin Fields yardage?
Well,
I'm not trying to hate on Justin.
There was a stretch where Fields would have loved to have thrown for 209 yards. So, all right, we're going to take a quick break. Other side of it, we're going to talk about the guys that maybe didn't fare so well in the combine and then some free agency and trade talk. Stick with us. All right, Khari, let's flip it around and let's talk about combine. No one is a loser here necessarily because, you're going to go to the NFL and things are good, but maybe guys that pre-workout look like they were in a certain position and post when you get some of those workout numbers maybe dropped a little bit. The shine might be off somewhat on some of these guys.
I'm going to jump right into it because I mentioned it briefly. The guy that everybody was like, oh, yeah, he's totally going to be a Chicago Bear. Let's lock it in because they need defensive tackle help. My guy, Caden McDonald. Listen, with him, again, we've kind of talked about this. You got to take it in context because he's 318 pounds. He's a nose, or they're 320 pounds. He's a nose. But I talked to a bunch of people after watching his workout and noting the fact that, like, listen, a lot of people are talking about he's going to go to the Bears, and they're like, yeah, you can't do that at 2020, at pick number 25. Because ultimately, here's the thing that about him on field, in addition to, his grades and all that stuff. He's incredible against the run. He is by far the best run-stuffing defensive tackle in this draft. He does not give you a whole lot as a pass rusher. Now, again, we knew that about him, right? What I sometimes like to see is when I watch a guy move, and that's a big deal for me. When you watch a guy move, do you see potential for growth there? You see the potential for him to do something else and expand his game. I don't know that I see a whole lot of expansion that is going to happen in Caden McDonald's game because he's just not a foot quick guy. He's not ever going to be somebody who's going to, thrash you off of first step quickness. I mean, it's not that he has no quickness at all, especially for his size, but he feels like a guy who's going to stay blocked on passing downs. And It just kind of is what it is, and you got to deal with that. And again, he's a guy his province is just here.
Well, I mean, in college, he won on strength. He won on the bull rush. That was how he mostly won most of his reps. The pass rush, the toolbox, they say it's still a work in progress. And is that a guy you want to draft at 25 overall? Yeah, he can come in and stop the run and give you some beef there. But in the first round, you need someone that's more of an impact player. Even though you are further down the board, you need a guy that can kind of come in and give your defense a little bit of juice.
Yeah, and I think one thing that people forwarded me some stuff, some info on what Dennis Allen tends to like in his defensive tackles, and he tends to like tackles that are more athletic, that are quicker, that are more explosive, because they're the ones that he wants to eat it up on the inside. We're going to use our giant ends, our immovable ends, to funnel everything into the heart of the defense. You don't get to go outside. Okay. We're keeping you inside. And then your awesome tackles have to eat everything up. And again, I feel like, for example, I'm going to bring in a veteran here that, is also potentially about to become available, which is Ashawn Robinson, right? So he's had a 10-year NFL career, basically just completely off of stopping the run. He's got a similar athletic profile to Caden McDonald, which is to say he's not very athletic. What he does do is stop the run. It's what he's always done. And he's done it well. You can make a 10-year career in the NFL off of that. But I think what we saw this past year is a guy like Andrew Billings, who is probably a little bit more like a true nose in somebody else's system. He did not perform well in this system that the Bears currently have. And now he's on the verge of not being here anymore. So I view Caden McDonald as kind of like one of those guys, right? Like an Ashawn Robinson, or like a souped up Andrew Billings, who, like, in your maybe average 4-3 defense, or more ideally in a 3-4, that guy is somebody that's like, okay, a plug and play, right? He's your 2-down guy. You take him off the field on 3rd down and you have somebody rush for him. I don't think that's what the Bears want to do at number 25. I just don't feel that way. And another guy who I thought maybe I liked better, and I think I still do like better as a more complete player, was Lee Hunter, who again, another big dude who I feel like is honestly, he is the unstoppable force, which is that, eventually, if you single block him, you can't hold him back forever. He's gonna win. He destroyed the Senior Bowl. Like anybody they put in front of him at the Senior Bowl, you're not single blocking that dude. He tested horribly, awfully. Now, does that mean he's not going to be a good player? No, not at all. But again, for the auspices of the pick at number 25, he's probably not going to be there, or he probably shouldn't be. And then but he's like in that situation where he probably shouldn't be your pick at number 25. But if you get down to the 50s, he's probably not going to be there anymore because people are going to look at him in the second round and be like, yeah, I could use a space eating nose. So it's one of those things, man, where the defensive tackles in this class are not good enough, by and large, in my opinion, to be the Bears' first round pick. I don't care what you need, because
I think what you're talking about a lot there, Khari, is trying to find surplus value. And when you look at free agent contracts with someone like an Ashawn Robinson or an Andrew Billings, generally these guys, they can personally have long careers by doing their thing, their specialty, eating a lot of dip and getting out there and doing their thing. But those contracts are usually pretty affordable for teams, right? They don't generally overpay nose tackles that are just, eating up space and eating up dip, right? So if you're going to use a premium pick, particularly your first round pick, you want to find surplus value. You want to get a guy that can outperform that contract. And if you look at a veteran contract for that skill set, those are pretty affordable. You look at a first round contract, even though it's affordable, that you're still basically overpaying for that. And it's still an unknown quantity. You don't know how these guys will adapt to the NFL. A young player who's, survived off of his strength for years and years in college may not be able to do that as a translation into the professional game. And so you are taking a risk with any draft pick. And when you can easily go out and afford some of these big guys, it may not be worth those premium picks. So I'm right there with you. I think that would be a poor use of your draft capital. Now, a non-premium position, at least as it's talked about, like off-ball linebacker and safety, that makes more sense to me because it's a position of need and it's a strength of the class. So, I think you're well in line here with what we're talking about. I want to move on to kind of just a couple of names before we get out of here. And we've already talked about DJ, in your gossip column. We talked a little bit about Edmonds. Maybe the Bears are the team out there trying to put out some buzz to try to see, but he requests, they've told him he's not coming back, right? He's requested the opportunity to try to go out and find a trade partner. Why would he do that? Why would he care? Why wouldn't he just want to be a free agent and go out and sign with whoever he wants? Well, he probably likes his contract, and he's probably cool with trying to get somebody to take on that contract and then go hit it in the future. I think that's why he's out there. But if Poles can move him for any kind of value, great. If not, we know that he's not going to be here because it's not much of a cap hit or any cap hit for the Bears to really talk about. So I don't know that we need to talk much about Edmonds because I think we've already got that done. You talked a little bit about Max, you talked a little bit about Trey, but maybe we can go a little bit further on there. Maybe put a little percentage on what you think the Bears' chances are of landing one of those two premier edge guys. And then maybe give us a name or two of who you're excited about the Bears maybe going after in free agency.
So I think I'm giving Max Crosby 20%.
Okay. See, that's significant. That's a big piece of the pie.
Yeah, because I think you're going to have, obviously, I think, Breer was, I think he had like 7 or 8 teams on there. So 20% is pretty good. And I'm giving that partly because I think he clearly seems to like the Bears and like what they got going on. Then again, I've also heard similar things about the Patriots, right? He would love to play for Mike Vrabel. But ultimately, for a guy who really wants to win, if they want to send him to somewhere who's going to win, I think that the benefit of the Bears is that they are not in the AFC.
Exactly.
So there's that. And you can also get a wide receiver off of them that you could use. And it also helps defray some of the cost. So you're not going to get 2 first-round picks off the Bears, but you are going to get DJ Moore, who's still young enough to be productive, right? And you can get a sweetener in there. And me personally, listen, if the trade package looked like if they actually agreed to terms of like, we're going to send we're going to get Max Crosby for DJ Moore, this year's first, and a 2027 third, and then maybe we get back, a 2026 fifth or something like that. Sign me up for that, because honestly, and this is not even a hate on any of the players that might be available at 25, because there are some ones I really like, and I'd be like, damn, we don't get a chance to draft them. It sucks. But yeah, I would give away this year's first rounder for Max Crosby. Yes. Like, what are you talking about? Say less. But I think, again, a lot of things have to line up here, because that the Raiders are going to want more, and they're going to be like, they're going to hang up the phone for as long as they can. And by all means, they've been really playing up that, hey, Max Crosby has a good relationship with John Spytek and Mark Davis. He doesn't really want to leave. He likes it here, et cetera, et cetera. But look, in the end, homeboy wants to win. So I think if it looks like he's going to be disgruntled to the point of, man, like, I'm not going to wait around for, 3 years worth of rebuild. Like, I'm getting older. I've had injuries. There's the other thing, is injuries are going to stop him from getting that maximum value. I think an NFC team has a good chance, and I feel like the Bears probably have the best chance, because they can offer the Raiders something they could use in return. Like, come on. Like, DJ Moore may not have had the best year here, but you go ahead and you throw him in there as the number 1 next to Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty. You actually got something. Now you just got to block so that he can actually make use of that. So I think that I would give that a 20%. If you ask me, Trey Hendrickson, I feel like it's probably about the same amount of percentage, if maybe a little bit less. Honestly, the name that I've heard for Trey Hendrickson the most is the Colts. And maybe that was just because I was in Indy, and a lot of people are like, the Indianapolis. But it's actually a name that I've heard a lot more, is the Colts. Now, with Trey, I would put him, he's less preferable than Max Crosby. It's not because Trey Hendrickson is bad, it's just Max Crosby's better. And if you want to maximize the hell out of that rookie contract for Caleb Williams before you have to pay him $60 million a year, because that's what it's going to be, get ready. It's going to be $60 million a year. If you want to maximize that window for 2 years, whatever it is, swing all the way. Go all the way. That's how
spelled with 2 X's. That's what you're saying.
Extra. I mean, for me, we're gonna go extra. As far as Max goes, I'm with you. If you can move that number 1, you already said number 1. It seems like BPA way the board may be looking, maybe a defensive tackle, but do you really need a defense tackle like a nose tackle? So if that's who you're looking at on your board, and you're thinking, well, I can take this 1. And I can reach for a guy, maybe not at a position like safety or linebacker. I can use my 1 for a guy like Crosby, come back in the second round, get my safety or linebacker. Then I think that's probably the best use of that 1 this year. And look, you said DJ Moore, he's thought of around the league in a pretty high level. I mean, as absolutely. Bears fans, we all we know is the last play, right? That's still in our brain. That last play, that's there. But league wide, he has a pretty good reputation. So.
Yeah, and here's a guy who put up 1,300 yards for the Bears.
Yeah. The value's there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another guy that I think of, if he, I'm assuming he comes available, please go after Jonathan Franklin Myers. I think that's a good player. Now, a lot of that is like contingent on how much money you have available and what your plans are. But again, I view it as like, if you were to get Max Crosby, that immediately elevates everything else you've got going on your defensive line. Yeah. You don't need a superstar nose at that point, because I think what the model that a lot of teams have been using is you get the one elite dude that you have to shift everything over to. You have to focus on blocking that guy. And then you can get the average player, right? The fit guy who just does what you need him to do. And then the Bears have a pretty good defensive line all of a sudden. You're looking at Montez Sweat. You got Javon Dexter, who's a solid player. And then you got Max Crosby. Like, yes, that right there is immediately better than anything you have. And then, of course, like, if that doesn't work out, look, you get Jonathan Franklin Myers, who can play inside and outside. And then maybe you draft one of these edges who I think I feel better about the edges than I do the defensive tackles. I don't know if you're going to get TJ Parker, but man, if you could get TJ Parker to fall to number 25, he's like literally perfect. He's just strong as hell. And he's a solid athlete. So that right there feels like the thing that I would do.
All right, well, we'll wrap up here.
Then we got my girl right here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it looks like hey man, the top of the hour story time might be coming up. So good note for us to maybe close on here. Kai, really appreciate you coming in, dropping the knowledge, sharing that with us. Of course, you're welcome anytime. Where can people find your stuff?
Well, you can find it on Windy City Gridiron. I write there every week, and I'm going to be dropping some podcasts and having some guests on, doing my thing, that you can check out some loose ends. We got to tie up from the combine, and particularly listen. I got a guy on here who has a really good track record of judging quarterbacks, who thinks Caleb Williams was one of the best he ever saw coming into the league, and thinks that he is going to be Mahomes level next year, which I'm going to let him explain. Exactly. Go ahead and stab that right in here. But I'm going to let him tell you when I can get him on. But you can also find me at KD Thompson 5, both on Twitter and on Blue Sky. You can find me around on Instagram and all that stuff as well. On Instagram, I'm at Khari DT. I don't do as much football posting on there, but I think that might have to change. But anyway, thank you so much for having me on. It's been fun chatting with y'all. I'm going to have to do this again.
100%.
Absolutely, man. We appreciate it. And to all of you guys, we'll be back probably in a couple of weeks after free agency starts, and Lester and I will break down any goings on. Look out for emergency pods, of course, if any big trades happen or anything like that. But I know a couple of the other guys are going to be going this week. And so, stick with us for good Bears content. Until next time, everybody, bear down.